Everybody out there is watching it grow tall. Gonna keep them out till there's no one left. Or have I just imprisoned myself? I built it up for myself. I built it up by myself, my homemade prison. All alone is what I always wanted. But now these walls are acting awfully haunted. I scream and shout, but there's no one left. It seems that I've imprisoned myself. I built it up for myself. I built it up by myself, my homemade Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. My name is Joe Gilder from Home Studio Corner, and we are live on the YouTubes. Welcome, I'm super glad you're here. So if we're new, hey, I'm Joe. I've been running Home Studio Corner since 2009. I had hair back then and everything. But tonight is just about, I want to answer your questions. Also, as you can see right here, this is the last day to get in on my new recording course called Home Studio Recording. That I open up a couple times a year. I'll open it up this past week, ending tonight at midnight. You can see the countdown timer right there. But I won't open up again until around Thanksgiving. So if you want to get better at recording, you feel like you're not where you want to be, but you know you want to get there, this course will absolutely help you. So the idea of the course, and I'll talk about it briefly and then we'll move on to your questions. But the idea is it helps you get it right at the source, which is the thing I've said a bajillion times. It's kind of a get it right at the source manual. So you'll learn recording technique, but also production technique, which is a big deal. All right, so while we're getting kicked off here, I'd love to see how far around the globe we are stretching. So leave a comment with where you're tuning in from, because I always get a giggle out of that. And while you're doing that, I will jump in on the first question Matthew left before the live stream even began. Matthew says, early question, is there a way to create two WAV files playing only one guitar rhythm track? I'm not a tight enough player, and I want to pan things left and right. It's a great question. So the idea is you're saying you're not tight enough to do a proper double of a guitar. So is there like a trick to make it be left and right in stereo? The short answer is no, there's not. A lot of people, and I feel like I'm fighting a war against this, but a lot of people want to take a guitar track, duplicate that track, pan one left and one right. And first of all, that does nothing. It literally it's still a mono signal. But then they want to take one of them and delay them a little bit, or add a different EQ or a different processor to it so it gives it a little bit of stereo width. It is never, and Adam Rogers, one of my longtime VIP members, posted this already, it's never as good or organic as actually recording it twice. So my real advice to you would be to practice. Practice playing along to a click track and get better at it. Like, you can get better at this, and then you don't have to ask this question. You don't have to search for workarounds that take a lot of time and don't actually get the job done. So that's my advice to you. Couple of things to give you a more rounded answer is think about using reverb on the guitar, perhaps. I don't love reverb on acoustic guitar, but it can work. Or perhaps some sort of a stereo delay can be kind of cool. Edward just joined home studio recording. Thanks, Edward. Enjoy. All right, so let's see where all the people are tuning in from. I love this. Oh, lots of answers. We got Texas, Pittsburgh, Arizona, Florida, Colorado, Oregon, Toledo, London, Kentucky. You almost got me. Chicago/Argentina. I don't know what that means. Hong Kong. That's cool. Canada's here. Texas, Kentucky. Some more Canada. We got a Colombia. We got Maryland. Quite a few Canadians. Chile. Jerusalem, Israel. All right, we've made it that far around the globe. Jamaica, sweet. London, I'm guessing the real London that time. Michigan, love it, love it. So I see a lot of familiar faces. Billy, I see you. And a lot of unfamiliar faces. So thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out. So I would love to just make this valuable for you. So if you have questions about production, recording, this course that I'm launching, or anything that I can answer, I will do my best to answer. And we'll just hang out for a little bit. That sound like fun? Yeah. That sounds like fun. Mark Holly says, what's the best way to add reverb for a singer in headphones? So specifically while recording. Let me show you that. Let's switch over to Studio One and I'll show you how I would do that. So let's see. Here's a session. Here's the singer. So obviously I don't have... actually, I could do this. I'm not going to show you the recording part. That's the only thing that'll be different. So what you would do is, here's the vocalist track right here, let's say. You would, obviously it's record enabled. So now you can hear me. Right now you can hear reverb on my vocal. Okay, how am I doing that? I'm just sending this recording track right now. You hear a little bit of a latency because you're hearing me from my microphone, but also through, actually, let's do it this way. Okay, so now, oh, that's going to cause too much feedback. So you got this vocal, you're hearing the vocal here, right? And then you just add a reverb send to that track. So I've got reverb set up down here on the right-hand side of my session. And now as the singer, I can hear this reverb, but it's not going to get recorded. So I can just have it be as much as I want. And that's delightful. Let me turn that off before I ruin this mix. But yeah, that's how you do it. You literally just, you can put a reverb on the track itself, or what I recommend doing is use a send to an effects bus with the reverb on there. That way you have them on separate channels. But that's how you do it. Now, other ways you can do it, I've got a mixer here in front of me. I could literally turn up reverb on the mixer itself if it has mixer. That's a nice way to do it. So it's just out here outside the computer. You're not having to run any reverb plugins, but it's not a big deal either way. All right, if I missed your question, feel free to ask it again, but give me a minute because it's going to take me a minute to get through these. But don't spam your questions. Nobody likes a spammer. Alicia, you're a new VIP member, right? Alicia says, question about the recording course. I bought the basic. Any option to upgrade in the future once I get a handle on things? I'd love to upgrade to the version that includes a critique from you. I don't really have a mechanism for the upgrading, but hit me up. We can figure something out offline. Good question. So I've got three tiers to the course. You can just buy the course. There's a second tier that gives you access to this cool course I created 2-3 years ago called 10-Day EP, where I literally created an EP from start to finish. So from nothing to mixed and mastered over the course of 10 separate days. It was really fun. That's included in the middle tier, and then the top tier you get my mixing course and my recording course, plus a critique from me, which is really fun. I did 2 critiques this morning, and they're just really, really fun. It's fun to hear what y'all are creating. Jerry says, want to fly a layer part anywhere I want on the comp track. Jerry, I don't know how to do that. I've never done that. I just don't work that way. So the way the comp tracks in Studio One work is it's really meant to take something and pop it up to that same spots for comping. That's what it's there for. So if you want to do something different, like move things around, just duplicate the track entirely. Like go into Studio One, the track that you want, right click on the track and choose duplicate track complete. Can you see that? And then it's going to create a complete copy of the track, and then you can go in and switch to whatever layer you were wanting, grab that, and then move it around wherever you want. That's really the only way to do it. I know I'm not super like in with all tickets we have in the system at Presonus and what's on the docket, but I know we've talked about that before as being something people kind of want. Mark says, but what if we don't monitor the input to avoid latency? Mark, great question, because that's how I work. So right now you're hearing me, you can't see it, but right down here I've got a Studio Live mixer from Presonus, and the way I record is I'm actually listening. If I was listening, I can't hear my own voice right now. You can hear me, but I can't hear me. It's fun. But if I was recording a vocal, I'd put on headphones, mute my speakers, and I would listen to myself right off the board. So there's no latency because I'm listening right off the mixer. And then inside of Studio One, I would do the same thing we had before, except instead of having the monitoring, see how it's going to record my vocal, but we're not going to monitor through Studio One, so we don't have that delay or that latency that was there. Then all you have to do is it's the same thing still. Actually, it's a little different because now since we're not monitoring, we can't hear it. So the way to do that is to put this on a pre-fader send. So set it to pre-fader, and then bring the volume down all the way, and then create a big feedback. I had that turned up too much. So turn on monitoring and just turn the volume down. So now you have my voice coming through dry, and then as I turn this up, sorry about that, everybody. As I turn this up, I get a little reverb. It's a clunkier solution, but it can work. Another option would be if you want to keep, this fader and not have to keep bumping it up and down, you could, let's experiment here for a second. We could create a bus. No, it doesn't work on a bus. An aux channel, that's right. The aux channels are fairly new, as of, I think, version 5. Create an aux channel, set that input, hang on, let's turn it down. Set that input to the same as your microphone, and then we can put this pre-fader reverb on there like that. So now I can record on this track, but we're sending our reverb off of this second track, and I can turn my reverb on and off by muting that track or muting the reverb, but then I don't have to keep turning my main vocal up and down, because that's the annoying part, right? If I have this turned down, with a pre-fader send, and then I want to hear what I just recorded, I've got to turn the fader back up. That's super annoying. This could be an interesting workaround. That's kind of fun. I've never done that before. All right, I'll leave that there in case people have questions. Paul Poulos says, hey Joe, question for you. How do I get the mix louder before the limiter? You don't have to. If your mixes aren't super loud, good job. Just like here, if I put the limiter on here, really whatever limiter you're using, but if it's, what's going on here? Where'd my plugins go? Oh, I've got it set to something weird. So if I put this limiter on here, if my mix isn't quite loud enough, I just turn that gain up. Bam, done. Problem literally solved right there. I feel like am I still going to that reverb? Let me turn that off too. Okay. I'll mute that as well. Kyron, what is up? I was that random black dude that kept seeing you at different events at the Sing conference. Oh yeah. What's up, Kyron? Good to see you. The Sing conference was interesting. There was weren't a lot of audio folks there. So we had a lot of folks coming by saying, oh, this looks nice, cool lights. I have no idea what you do. How similar is Studio One? This is from Breton. How similar is Studio One to Pro Tools? I have Pro Tools HD, just curious from a power user. I moved from Pro Tools. They're not the same. In one sense, you can just say that all DAWs do the same thing, right? I'm going to turn my buffer down so I don't stress this computer out while I'm live streaming. Thing, but in another sense, it's kind of like which motorcycle you're just going to have a preference. You might like Gibson and I might like Fender, or I might like Gibson and you might like Fender. So they kind of all do the same thing. I think Pro Tools is great. I enjoyed it when I used it. Studio One made a lot of things easier on me, a lot of small things. I've done some videos on that. And there's some things that Pro Tools does that Studio One can't do. So if you're doing a lot of surround sound mixing, for example, you can't do that in Studio One yet. So that's a big one for a lot of people. But I think that's on the docket for one day. So yeah, I mean, I personally wouldn't use it because I don't mix around, but I know it's a big deal. Scott Parker is one of my not lifelong, but long-time VIPs, says, what's your take on saturation and distortion? I use mix console stuff on Studio One and tape saturation plugin, but so low I don't know if it does anything. I use the red light distortion on bass if it needs it, but a bus and track. So I would just mess around with the... So you have these mix effects on the top right-hand side. You can't see it because my face is in the way. But if I open up one of them, this is a couple of the different consoles that we have. So this is putting a console sound across the entire... I just realized the top of my window is cut off. You can't see the very top. Doesn't really matter. We have a bunch of different emulations that you can get. As a Sphere member, you get these included or you can buy them separate. But it's kind of similar to like the Virtual Console collection, the idea that it's doing something across all the channels. The cool thing about this is you don't have to put more than one plugin. It just does it under the hood across all the buses and channels. But typically, it's still fairly subtle. So if you try to crank it, you really have to crank it and hit the boost to get it to really drive. Otherwise, you're getting more of a subtle, just kind of a warmth. What I think is really interesting, let's do this. I'm going to switch to CTC One, which has been around longer. But it's got I'm going to turn it up a little bit, 3 different modes. It's classic, tube, and custom. Listen to what happens when I just play this mix through these consoles and switch them. It's just different. That's kind of the way I like to use it is I just switch between consoles until I find one that kind of fits the song. Then I just mix through that. So let me do that right now. You see how they're just different, right? The tube one is always brighter to me, and it always surprises me a little bit. The classic one sounds nice, kind of middle, and then the custom one always seems to have a deeper low end to me in general. But yeah, the tube one, being that it's brighter, tends to grab attention a lot. I really like the custom one. I end up choosing the custom one, which is funny because these are like modeled after real consoles. I think custom is kind of PreSonus' own blend. But that's kind of the way that I use it. Just kind of an overall, do they sound exactly like the console they're emulating? I don't know, but it's cool, and it kind of helps me get there a little bit quicker. But other than that, and using like red light distortion in specific instances, I don't throw like a saturation plugin on there very often at all. So forgive me, I'm just going to keep plowing through these questions. I haven't even scrolled down all the way, I don't think. No, I have. All right, cool. Paul Pilati says, hi, Joe. Is Production Club 2.0 that I released back in 2014 very different from the new course? It is. The Production Club was cool. I've just gotten a lot better at both just the production side of things, but also at teaching. Doing this, I'm kind of like tenured now. Does that make sense? Like I've been doing it so long, I've learned which questions people are going to ask, and so I kind of preemptively answer a lot of those in the course itself. And the quality of the course is better, and just like the actual production quality of it. But there's going to be a lot of overlap in what I covered there. It just goes a lot more in depth. What I ended up doing, so since I started Home Studio Corner in 2009, launched my first course in the fall of that year. And then I started launching like little mini courses, like understanding EQ, understanding compression. There were all these little courses that talked about specific little pieces of the process, and it was cool because I was kind of learning what you wanted and what was helpful. But I ended up with these like 20 or so courses, which ended up just being confusing for people. So instead of just making more or revamping the old ones, I decided around 2019, 2020 to get rid of all the old courses, retire them, and do a really great mixing course that covers everything. So you don't have to get an EQ course and then the mixing course, and then a really great production course that covers everything. And so that's what I've got now, with a mastering course on the way, by the way. So I'm not going to say it's coming this summer, but it's coming this summer. If that answers your question, Paul. But yes, there's absolutely some overlap for sure. Luane says on the mastering page, how do I lock my picks to my song like we... The way you add a pick to the project page is you literally just drag it into the artwork section here, or you can choose it from a browser. So let's see if I have something that'll work as a thumbnail. I think I've got one. I've got like a SoundCloud thumbnail from church. Yeah, and Studio One says, do you want to scale this because it's too big? And I say, sure. And so now that's there. So now this will be attached to, if MP3s and whatever file formats allow you to embed the album artwork, it'll be embedded. Now, WAV files don't. So if you think something's broken, you export WAV files and they don't have the little thumbnail with the picture. That's just how WAV files work. They're not meant to be that way. But MP3s can. So it's kind of cool to have if you're going to send, if you're selling MP3s off of, Bandcamp or something where they're literally downloading MP3s. That's a cool way to make sure they have the actual album artwork embedded in them. Alex says, what is the point of the polarity on input controls? Great question. So polarity is this weird thing. Let me go back to... I'm trying to find an example. So, quick lesson on polarity. Let's say... okay. Let's use my hands. So let's switch so we can actually make this a little bit. So a waveform goes like this, right? A very simple sine wave goes whoop, whoop, right? Goes up and down and back up to center. So the volume goes up, volume goes down, kind of. That's not super accurate. It's literally a pushing and a pulling. So if we looked at a waveform literally on an oscilloscope, we'd see it goes up and down. And now how quickly it goes up and down is the frequency and that kind of thing. If you were to take one that goes like this, and you took another one that was the exact same everything, just flipped, if you flipped the polarity of it, then this one would go, and if you had two of those and you played them at exactly the same time, what you would hear is silence, because they would completely cancel one another out. When one was pushing, the other would be pulling, and the net result would be zero. It's crazy. It's physics. Now, in a recording studio, we don't have that kind of cancellation where I put two mics on my drum kit and my snare drum completely disappeared. That doesn't happen. But what can happen is two mics can be out of phase to where the signal is hitting one microphone before it hits the second microphone. And there can be some frequencies that are canceling each other out. So they can either cancel each other out, or if you line them up, where the ups are at the same spot, that will be even louder. So you have two things that'll happen with phase issues. Some frequencies will get enhanced, other frequencies will get cut. And by a simple way to test that is by clicking that polarity button and flipping it, and then seeing if things change. Specifically, mostly it's a thing that you do on drums when there's multiple microphones on the kit. So I may have a snare drum and overheads, and I'll flip the polarity of the snare drum, and one way might sound better than the other. Sometimes it doesn't change. Sometimes it goes from sounding like psh, psh, to goosh, goosh, this huge snare drum sound, or kick drum will go from going kick, kick, kick to foom. And you'll say, man, I'm glad I checked that because it sounds infinitely better. The physics of the placement of the microphones was working against me, and now it's not. So that's what phase buttons are for. So you're literally just taking the waveform and saying, flipped you over. Flipped you. But it really only matters when you have two copies of the same source, not copies, two different paths picking up the same performance. So if you had another common example is a bass guitar. You record the bass direct, but you also go to the amp and you put a mic in front of it. Those two signals are probably not going to be completely lined up because the distance it has to travel from the speaker to the microphone might cause just the slightest bit of latency. So flipping the polarity sometimes can help align those frequencies. Or literally taking the microphone signal and sliding it back in time, that can help also. But there are situations where if I'm just in a hurry, I'll just flip the polarity of one of the bass tracks, and if one of them sounds better, I leave that and move on. So the long answer to but it's a complicated question. You can't answer that one quickly, or you end up leaving out giant swaths of things. I shouldn't drink bubbly drinks on a live stream because now I'm just going to burp. Sorry. I could mute myself when I burp. But anyway, good question, Alex. DIY with Nick Vasquez says, Joe, is there a quick way to drag and drop a MIDI clip from one track to another and have it merge as opposed to clip on top of a clip? Good question. I don't know. I would guess you can do that by holding down a... Try doing it holding down like Option or Command or Control. That may do it, but honestly, I'm not sure. Gregor would know. Gregor's not here. SS Fame says, "Hi Joe, should you be running Fat Channel as an insert in vocal buses or a send on a main vocal?" Good question. So sends are not for things like EQ and compression. Generally speaking, a send is where I've got this cool vocal sound. I want to send it off to an effect like a reverb or a delay. That's what sends are for. If I want to process this vocal, I want to put a cool compressor and a cool EQ on it. That goes on the channel, either on the vocal itself or on the bus that you're sending the vocal to. It's the same either way. Excuse me. Oh dear, the bubbles. Let's see. GMD Sound says, I forgot what's a fat channel. Can you remind me? I'm part of the tech team at my church. Well, it depends on what you mean, but fat channel in the PreSonus world is... I'm sorry, I was showing stuff on the screen, and you've been looking at my face the whole time. Sorry. This is fat channel. So it originated as something on the Studio Live mixers, the Series 3 mixers that have the touchscreen. You have these same plugins available there. But now we have them as a plugin in Studio One as well. So it's literally just a high-pass filter / gate, a compressor, and an EQ. And you can swap the order, and you've got several different models of each to choose from. So it acts as a channel strip, but one where you could pick and choose which compressor and which EQ you want, if that makes sense. Good question. Man, this reminds me of the old Ask Joe days. Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Those were good times. Let me check on the stream health. It's looking good. It's telling me my bit rate is higher than it needs to be. I feel like that's a good problem to have. Okay, super. Let's see. Domestic Miss says, hey Joe, any tips for recording alone and tracking drums? Do you record a guitar to play to or knock it out from memory or just to a click? Great question. Knocking it out from memory sounds terrible. So no, typically... I'm not a drummer, but when I have tracks I send to my drummer, if we're not going to record it together, I will send him what's called a scratch track. So usually it's a guitar and a vocal recorded to a click, to a set tempo, and I send that to him. He brings it into his system. I tell him what the tempo is. Everything locks up in his system, and then he records to a click and my scratch tracks. Even then... It's not as fun as recording to fully produced stuff, but drummers, you have to be early in the process, and it just stinks sometimes. Edgardo says, hey, Joe, do you usually start mixing in mono and then pan everything after everything sounds right in mono, or do you start mixing in stereo since the beginning? So I've done videos, and I've talked about how important it is to mix in mono. I just don't practice what I preach anymore on that. Mixing in mono is super handy for hearing... if there are big issues, especially with EQ and kind of the low mid-range in your mix, and if you're having problems, flip to mono that's a great way to just check things and see how it's working. But let's get some music going again. All right, got some music. But I just don't tend to use it much anymore. And maybe that's just from experience and finding that I can get the sounds that I want and don't need to check it in mono. I know it sounds kind of arrogant, but that's just the nature of it. Kind of like there's guys who can go in and hear a song once and then lay down a track in a studio. Like that's just a thing they do because they've done it so many times. So no, my static mix is me setting levels and panning and then moving on. So I really am just using mono as a tool when I need it. It's not an on all the time thing. Although that's a great strategy, and if you do that, go for it. It's just not what I've been doing lately. And by lately, I mean several years. Let's see. Man, every time I scroll Everything jumps and I lose my place. KJ says, how do you feel the difference between physical gear and in the box? Do you prefer gear instead of a plug-in? They all sound great, you know? I've got real guitar amps, a couple, and I've got like a Helix that has a bunch of amps, or the 11 rack, or Empire, which has them in Studio One. They all can sound cool however you want to use them. So I don't really care. I do like having channel strips on the front end because it's fun to sing, for example, to sing through a really nice tube preamp. It has a great feel to it. But I also understand that when I do this right now, like you're hearing my voice right now, the PreSonus PX1, which is like $130, into the stock preamp of the Studio Live, and it sounds pretty good. That song I played for you earlier, that's this song here, that all those vocals are through here, mainly because I just needed to get it done. I didn't feel like patching that in and waiting for the tubes to warm up. So I don't think the gear is the limiting factor for anyone, but it can be a nice upgrade if you want it. What's the best way to record electric guitar through Studio One? I don't know. The way that sounds best? That's a cheeky answer, but if you don't have an amp, then use Empire. It's very cool. If you do have an amp, put a mic in front of it and record it that way. Or try both. I've done that too. In this mixing course, or the recording course, I've got one pass of electrics is through an amp, and the next pass of electrics is through a plug-in. And you mix and match. Use them to taste. Ron says, when it comes to needing some improvements to drum tracks or a drum track, do you find Studio One's drum presets helpful? I don't know what you mean, Ron. Do you mean specifically like the EQ and compressor presets? Presets can be cool, but to me it's kind of like if you said, hey, what do I say to my wife when she's upset with me? Well, it depends on the situation, right? I feel like presets are a good guess. Like if this might work here today, but it doesn't mean it'll work any other time on any other track. So it's really just a guess. Kind of like general rule of thumb, let's boost the lows, cut 400 and boost at 8K and then compress at a certain setting. It can be okay. You'd get much greater mileage out of actually learning how to use things like EQ and compression and when to use them and how to use them. That's where you're going to see massive improvements to the sound. Presets can be a great starting point. They can be a great way to learn things, but I think the greatest benefit is when you actually take the time to invest time in learning it. And I've got a mixing course that teaches you that really well, if you want to check that out. It's at homestudiocorner.com/mix, or if you click the link down here, there's a package where you can get my recording and mixing courses together. This is a time for me to just remind folks, if you're just joining me, I'm here to answer your questions, and I'm going to be here for a while, so grab a beverage and come hang out. But one of the reasons I'm doing this live stream is to celebrate the launch of Home Studio Recording. My flagship recording course is out this week, and the sale ends tonight at midnight Central Time. You can see there's a countdown on the screen. That's when the sale ends. So if you want to get in, I'm not opening it up for another 6 months. Come hang out with us, learn how to get great sounding recordings, which will also help you get great sounding mixes. Commercial over. Let's jump back in to your questions. Okay. Domestic Miss says, any tips for recording? Oh, you already answered that one. Durga. Alicia says, room question. I'm in a one-bedroom condo. My desk/office/recording area is open dining room space between living and kitchen. I don't think I'm getting much room noise, but I'm not sure my options. I mean, if you're not getting noise, that's your answer. But I think sometimes people think they're not getting noise, and then when they treat their room and go back and compare, they realize, oh, I was getting a lot of noise before. So that might be... There may be something there. It may not be a problem. I'm just like, just keep making music. Throw some blankets up if you need to. Is there a way to monitor effects without printing them to the track? Yes. What I showed earlier is literally that. Really anything. You put a plug-in on a track, you can hear it without printing it. That's almost always how it works in every system. Matt Duggan says, how are you liking your Helix, and does it work well with Studio One? I like it. I just use it as a literal analog box. So I plug it in with XLRs into my mixer. So yeah, it works great with Studio One because that's just how I use it. I don't want to switch interfaces all the time. But I like it. I used it a bunch when I first got it, and I haven't used it in a few weeks, other than playing through it. So I need to get in and tweak some more. But yeah, it's great. it's just got a whole wealth of sounds. It's fantastic. David Scanlon says, songwriting, how do you balance writing your truest music and stuff that'll actually land well with general audiences? I'm the wrong person to ask because I don't really care about the latter. I feel like writing my truest music is kind of what I was made to do, and that will connect with a group of people. It might not connect with the masses, but in a lot of ways, I would think I would rather connect deeply with a smaller group of people than a shallow connection with a huge group. That said, if I had a song that went multi-platinum and won me a Grammy, I'd be okay with that too. And yes, I live in Nashville, but I'm not super into chasing the write what people want thing. It's just not me. I'd rather write kind of what's in me. Hey, I've got bubbly drink number 2. Here comes some more bubbles. Okay, let's see. Next question. Christopher says, any way you can use MIDI effects to add swing to one-shots and impact or another plugin? No idea. But I would think so. There's a lot of swing settings just with the MIDI notes. But yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'm not much of a MIDI expert. Can Studio One load channel names on the Series 3 mixer onto tracks in Studio One? No, I don't think so. Ava Freak says, saw your first videos back in 2010 when I was in high school. That's awesome. Thanks for being a subscriber for so long. What do you think of metal pop filters versus mesh pop filters? I only use mesh because that's all I have, and they work fine. I understand that maybe the theory is the mesh absorbs some high frequencies and the metal ones don't, or the metal ones work better for pops and plosives, but I mean, I don't know. I would never spend money on the metal one because the mesh ones work, and if it ain't broke, don't buy metal things. No, anyway, yeah. But I'm sure they're great. I know that they can be cool, but I just don't use them. Let's see. Art Addict says, can you give some mix placement example? I don't know what you're asking, Art Addict, so ask again in a different way. I'll be happy to answer. All right, I'm catching up on the comments, so if I missed your question, go ahead and ask it again, because it jumps around sometimes. Steve says, VU meter in console. What's the best way to get personas to consider hardwiring the VU meter above the instrument vocal fader like input control would be a wrench item? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't use the VU meter, so I'm sure there's value to it, but I think I like the regular meters just fine too. Afonso says, how much do you care for competing frequencies, especially in the low end? I hear a lot of opposite takes on how much it matters. That's a great question, Afonso. So I think it's overstated in general. So to me, people talk about, I used to get this question all the time when I was doing the weekly podcast, was, Colin Schlegel's here. What's up, Colin? Dude, it's been so long. Are you in Nashville? Weren't you thinking about coming to Nashville? Anyway, we need to catch up. Email me or answer here. What was I saying? Afonso was asking about, do low-end frequencies like compete with each other? I don't think they really do. I mean, yes, they can. But you'll hear people say, Joe, how do I keep the... I just lost my train of thought. How do I keep the kick drum from interfering with the bass frequencies and the bass from interfering with the kick drum frequencies? You don't. Like, drummer and bass player are like best buddies in the band, right? The kick drum and the bass guitar in my head are one instrument that just play at slightly different times. So one has more sustain, one has the punch. So like, ideally, when the kick goes boom, like the kick and the, I've said this in the video before, the kick drum and the bass guitar are like the word boom. The kick is the buh, and the bass guitar is the When they're playing well together, you get boom. And I don't care who has which frequencies as long as it sounds cool. Now, will you need to EQ them? Yeah, but I'm never thinking I got to EQ this kick drum to match that bass, or I got to EQ this bass to get out of the way of the kick drum. When I listen to the bass, I think I need to EQ that bass because it's muddy. There's too much at 120 that I can't hear the nice low frequencies that I want to hear. That's kind of where my brain goes. The whole, I'm going to move this to get out of the way of that. Maybe that's what I'm doing subconsciously, but I think when you get, that's a trap you can fall down in, where you're literally mixing with your head, using logic and math, rather than mixing with your ears and your heart. and doing what sounds good. Like I can say, I cut here and I boost here. That should work. No, there's no reason that should work unless it sounds good. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting a little crispy with that question. Okay. PMG says, "Hey Joe, greetings from Beijing, China. We made it all the way around the globe. I think we just need... No, we've got Australia. We just need like Hawaii to make it all the way around. We've got lots in the US and Canada, South America. I know we got London, Israel, China. So we got Asia covered. I think Australia, yeah, because I saw Australia earlier, and Adam Rogers is here. So yeah, I guess we have all the continents covered. I don't think we have anybody in Africa. Somebody from Africa needs to comment. Let me know. I get some love from Africa here occasionally. Okay, sorry. Sorry, PMG. Here's your question. Which artists/bands have you been listening to recently? That's a good question. I have been listening to recently. My wife and I got on a Lumineers kick for a while. So listen to that a bunch. Foo Fighters still makes a regular appearance in my rotation because I just love them, especially now that Taylor's gone. It's just sad. Who else? I went on the Led Zeppelin kick a month or two ago and listened to a bunch of Zeppelin. I'm kind of all over the place. But those are some I can think of right now. It's not a great answer, but I never know. It's always changing. Larry says, just signed up for the recording course. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. I hope you love it. Is there a good way, Creator Season says, is there a good way to boost drum loops? What do you mean? Like, turn them up? Not to be snarky, but I would just turn them up. So I'm probably not understanding your question. Double M Pro, everything jumped again. There we go. I was wondering when I'm working on a session and I want to import some tracks with some routing set up from a template. I'm not understanding your question. With some routing set up from a template I have or from a different session, how would I do that? I know in Pro Tools you can. Yeah, there's an import song data thing. Let me show you. If you go to the menu, you're not going to be able to see this. Yeah, under song in the menu, you can't quite see it, I don't think. There's an import song data option, and that lets you pick a Studio One song file and then choose. It's a lot like the Pro Tools option, the import session data thing in Pro Tools. Which sample rates do you record versus mix at? I'm mostly at 44.1, 24-bit. I did a bunch of stuff at 48 because there was a season where this mixer only did 48. It was annoying, and they finally fixed it or updated it to do 44.1, but 44.1 is where I would stay because that's where it's going to land. 48, if you're doing music, can sometimes be, or if you're doing like stuff for video, they're typically at 48 and 96, I think. I'm a 44.1 fella. Jeremy Locke, you got a favorite plugin? I'm really liking Pro L2 from FabFilter. It's one of the only third-party plugins I own. It's just a limiter that you can't. It's hard to make it sound bad, and that may be a negative because you end up making things maybe too loud. But it's just you can push it, and it still sounds musical, and I love that. Josh says, loving the recording course. Thanks, Josh. Luane says, what plugins are on your master bus? So you mean for mixing or for mastering? For mixing, it's usually like an SSL style compressor, and that's it, usually. Maybe an EQ if I just, at the very end of the mix process, I want to just kind of adjust the entire mix a little bit. I'll do it there. But then in mastering, really for me, mastering is a limiter and a volume increase, and then maybe some EQ, maybe multi-band compression, maybe mid-side processing if it needs it. But I'm a pretty hands-off mastering engineer. I will make it sound better, but I won't over mess with stuff, if that makes sense. This is from Alex. In what circumstance would you use parallel compression? I feel like I'm being grilled in like an interrogation, or like I'm on I'm on the stand. In what circumstance would you use parallel compression? That's a great question, Alex. Parallel compression is so cool, and I don't use it probably enough. So the circumstance in which I do use parallel compression, which is the idea of sending the signal through, like having a dry copy of the signal and then a compressed copy of the signal that you blend together. If I can't get what I was wanting with one compressor, then I'll try parallel. If I'm thinking, man, this sounds so good by itself, and every time I try to compress it, it kills it a little bit. I like some of the stuff that the compression adds, but it's taking away too much. Then I'll say, let me try parallel on that. And that usually does the trick. So I get kind of the benefits of that aggressiveness of a compressor without touching the rawness of the track. Knob Gaming, or Knob Gaming, she says, what does really gluing mix mean? So what does it mean when people say it glues a mix together? That's one of those, isn't that an annoying term? I've said it probably 1,000 times, but I get like it doesn't make a lot of sense, and there's not really a good answer to that. But to me, it's just this idea of everything feeling like it goes together. And that what something that glues a mix together could be, oh, you know, this song was missing something until like this song here. What kind of glues this mix together is kind of like when these background vocals come in, it just makes it feel really, really kind of full and happy. Let me see if I can get that to play. So that's a production kind of thing where there's like 1,000 vocals here. If you haven't heard this, it's ridiculous. I'm sorry. My mic has been off for... sorry. I had my mic muted. I apologize. That's embarrassing. And I didn't see the chat come through till now. So sorry. So sorry. So sorry. Please forgive me. Okay, back to... There were so many comments. I'm sorry. I was scrolled up in the comments. I didn't see them. I'm embarrassed. Okay. Oh, Mustafa's in Egypt, by the way, so we have Africa covered. Sweet. That's awesome. Okay, let's go. Let's go. If you have currently new questions or I haven't covered your question, go ahead and ask them because there's a whole bunch of comments about my mic being off. And I probably had great answers for you, but I'm so sorry. Oh, that's such a rookie mistake. This is the one problem of not hearing myself in the room the way I have it set up. I don't want to be on headphones for hours and hours at night. So, anyway, so sorry. Thank you for sticking with me. Do you use, this is from Ben, says, do you use OBS for live stream? I do. Yeah. Right now I've got OBS. And right now it's, my DSLR is going into a Camlink 4K, which is a capture USB little dongle deal that captures HDMI. OBS is capturing my screen. It's also capturing, it's got the text at the bottom on a separate thing. And then the little countdown timer is just basically a browser window over there that it's looking at as well. It's handy. I'm sure there are better paid options, but OBS has been solid for sure. David, what's up? David Pratt says, with the launch of the new course and the retirement of the legacy content, will we still have access to the legacy content which we purchased in the past? Yeah, absolutely. It's all in there. It's all in the system. It's just not stuff I'm actively promoting and selling anymore. You can't buy it anymore, but it's there for sure. Brent says, Joe, I saw that you have the Personas Quantum. How do you have it hooked up to get audio signal into your DAW? I don't use the Quantum because my main interface is my mixer. But when I do use it, I just hook it up like normal. Just plug it into the computer. Sorry, that's a snarky answer, but I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure what you're asking. When tracking guitar, do both guitarists double track? Good question. Sometimes. If you listen to AC/DC, you've got Malcolm on the left, Angus on the right, generally, I think. But there's usually more than just two guitars, and then lead guitar up the middle. Just do what sounds good. But too much doubling can be a bad thing too, so just be careful of that. Baby Panda says, I've been watching your Studio Live tutorial since I got my mixer and also some of the vocal mixing tips when I started. Well, thank you. Is there a shortcut key for the pointer tool? I think it's just the number 1 on the keyboard. Joe, I saw that you... Oh, I already read that one. Oh, we have New Zealand too, so yeah, we've covered all the continents. Except for if anybody's in Antarctica, that'd be cool. But I don't think so. Dale says, do you have any tips and tricks for producing a mix that sounds consistently good across speaker types? Car, iPhone, high-end speaker. Biggest thing is just doing a lot of mixing. Another big thing about consistency that people don't talk about is make sure you mix at the same volume every time. So have your volume knob taped in place and always mix at that volume. It'll make your mixes sound way more consistent, at least from one mix to the next. And then over time, you can start to say, okay, generally speaking, my mixes sound boomy in the car. How can I come back to the studio and make some adjustments to fix that? If you're mixing at random volumes all the time, the frequencies are going to hit your ears differently, and you're going to have a hard time figuring out consistency. So that's what I was saying. Man, I can't believe I talked in silence for like 3 minutes. Jeffrey Bryan says, hey Joe, big fan of your music. Just overall, I'm moving to Nashville in June. Nice, I'm a songwriter. I spent most of my life as a lineman. What's your best advice to get my music heard? Jeffrey, I don't know, man. Honestly, best advice to get my music heard. So not to be snarky, but I think your question is, how do I get what I want? And I think a better question would be, how can you bring value to the Nashville community? Like, how can you help other people in doing so, you'll help yourself. That feels like a very like inspirational, motivational speaker answer. But you'll find that you are not the first songwriter to move to Nashville and want to get their music heard. And that's a very like, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? Kind of a question. So if you can think in terms of a business, like here's an example. I'm doing this live stream promoting my course, right? My course is a type of content that I've created. And there are people who maybe have been watching my videos since 2009 who are just now gonna buy a course from me. Or people who have watched me for a decade and will never spend money with me. And like, that's okay too. So I think a part of it is like, how can I create value for the world? And then trusting that there will be a percentage of those people who will want more value and will want to like pay for it. So like, not everybody on this live stream is probably going to buy the course, and that's fine. I never expected that. But if I go into it with, man, what's the best way to get these people to give me their money? It's just a different vibe. Maybe that's how it comes across, and I need to work on it. But generally speaking, like, think about ways that think about it as a business. You are a business. Songwriting is a weird business because you can write the best song ever, but if the politics don't play right and if you don't get in front of the right people, it doesn't get picked up. It's just a weird business to be in. But if that's what you want to do, then I say try to figure out how you can add a whole bunch of value. Sounds like I said volume. Add a whole bunch of volume and you'll be great. Breton says, do you teach ear training? What about music biz basics or how to pitch songs? If not, resources. Ear training, yes. I do a lot of that here on the YouTube channel, actually. Music biz basics or how to pitch songs, no. Because that's not the world I live in, sorry. Is there a shortcut key for... Oh, already did that. See, I'm having repeats now, sorry. Which acoustic guitar recording technique do you prefer for which situation? XY, stereo pairs versus mid-side, solo singer guitar versus in a thick mix. Hope that makes sense. So if it's going to be more of an acoustic project, then I'll record the guitars in stereo using XY. That way I've got the width there if I want it, but it still works well in mono. For if it's a guitar vocal and the singer is singing and playing at the same time, then I'll just use one mic for each because the stereo gets weird because singers never face the exact same way the guitar faces. And then mid-side I never use. I just use XY when I'm doing stereo, otherwise it's mono. And if it's going to be a big mix, then I don't bother with stereo. Usually I just put a mic on it and record it because I don't need it to be super thick because it's going to kind of be a background sound in the mix. Joe, what do I get for signing up to the class? Good question, Jeffrey. So you get access to, it's like 84 videos and 30 plus hours of me walking through combination of teaching you concepts about recording and production, but also doing it on camera in front of you. And not just doing it on one song, taking the same song and producing it 3 completely different ways. So we start out with just a guitar vocal. We do that a couple different ways of doing a guitar vocal, overdubbing it, doing it all live at the same time, trying out different techniques there. Then we move into like a medium-sized production where it's more guitars, keyboards, cello, not a full band thing, but a bigger arrangement of that song, completely starting from scratch again. Then we start from scratch again and do a full band production of the song where it's, scratch tracks, drums, bass, electric guitars, big and huge. So that's that. And throughout the course, as I introduce a new concept, as we need to talk about stereo miking things on acoustic guitar, we'll stop and have a module of the course that just talks about miking acoustic guitars, stereo miking versus mono miking, the benefits and pros and cons and different strategies for doing that. So it's kind of a learn as you go kind of a course. And you can get that, the link down below. Go to homestudiocorner.com/record. Looks like we got over 3 hours before that sucker closes down. But go see if it's a good fit. Also, there's a crap load of reviews from happy customers on there. So these literally I just copied and pasted into there. I may have fixed a typo or two because I'm an Enneagram 1 and I got to fix those kind of things. But those are literally I just copied and pasted from the comment section of the course on the last video. I said, hey, how'd you like it? They leave a bunch of comments and I put them on there. So that might help you as well. Dance B9 says, how much mid-side EQ do you use on your tracks? Almost none. In mastering, I will occasionally use mid-side in specific instances where there's a problem. Like if I'm mastering something and the electric guitars are pan hard left and right, but they're way too muddy, and I want to just EQ those, then I'll use mid-side EQ for that. I'm not against it. That's the main place where I'll use it. What's your go-to signal chain for recording vocal tracks? From Mark. My go-to, if it's like I'm really wanting to do this well, man, I like this song. I haven't ever played it with a band, but I want to. My go-to would probably be this ADL 700 from Personas. They don't make it anymore. It's a tube channel strip with EQ and compression on the way in. And then one of the Roswell microphones, like the Mini K47 that I used for years, or there's that Mini 87 over there that I haven't used a bunch, and he's actually sending me a new mic to check out too. So that'd probably be it. That'd be my dream chain. A little compression going so I can feel it kind of pushing back when I'm singing. It's always really fun. Good question. Do you change the block? Also, I've sung through Universal Audio, a couple different versions, like an LA 610, which has the optical compressor and that killer preamp. That preamp is just unbelievable, especially when you're singing through it. A couple different versions of that combination I always love singing through, for sure. They look cool too. They are pricey. Do you change the block size when recording versus mixing? If I'm monitoring back or doing MIDI, then yes, I do. If it's just audio recording, I actually monitor off my mixer, so I don't need low latency. So I just leave the buffer high all the time. But yeah, if I need to play something and hear it quickly back through the software, then yeah, I'll lower it for sure. Tom says, do you master your own mixes? If so, how do you step away from the mix to come back to the master session with fresh ears, not emotionally attached to the mix? I don't know if it's completely possible, but I do end up mastering a lot of my stuff, mainly because I enjoy it and it's fun, part of the process. So I do lose a certain amount of objectivity, right? I'm blind to some of it. But also, what's really interesting is you can go from mixing a song and feeling great about the mix and saying that's done, to then mastering it alongside, say, 3-4 other songs on an EP, and listening to that song and then immediately clicking over and listening to the adjacent songs. You immediately notice things about that mix that you need to fix, like some EQ moves you need to do to maybe it's too harsh, things like that you can't really check when you're mixing, right? You can't quickly switch over to a different mix from the album when you're in a mix session. Not really. But in a mastering session where they're all just right there, you can just click around and hear everything. It's really cool to go bam, bam. Oh, yeah, that one's really warm. I like that. This one's kind of feeling harsh. Let's compensate for that a little bit with our EQ or multiband or something to make them feel better together. So yeah, the mastering process kind of helps me. That part of the process helps me keep it from being too precious about it. Gary Fox, what is up, Rockstar? Man, it's good to see your name come through here. Beach Access. Wow, I got really excited to see Gary. Beach Access says, how can I change from WDM drivers back to ASIO? I have no idea. I'm so sorry. I've never used Windows I haven't used Windows for audio in like 20 years, so I just don't know. I'm so sorry. Adlace Studio says, are you a fan of making and using tracks in your live sessions? No, but I don't play live much at all, other than I play at church every Sunday and we don't use tracks there. Nothing against it, though. I mean, there's a place for it. I like to see what can happen with musicians in a room, because if you have to make it work, there's a cool kind of pressure there, and something special can happen sometimes. Sean says, how can I keep a good cymbal balance with my overheads? My hats are really loud no matter what I do. Rode M5s. So you're saying the hi-hats specifically are too loud? That's a drummer. So if we go with the get it right at the source mantra, then the first place I'd look is the drummer. If you're the drummer, hey, learn to play the hi-hats quieter. Or get different hi-hats that are maybe darker sounding, or I don't think you can muffle hi-hats, can you? I'm not a drummer, but that's the ultimate answer. The other is you can mess with the height of the overheads, and that can change how the cymbals get picked up. But if the hi-hat's too loud in general, kind of like I said before, then there's really no magic placement that's going to fix that. Unless you tried to do a placement that's... One option you could try, and I still don't think this would work very well, is get a hi-hat mic. So you've captured that, and then try to use maybe like ribbon mics or figure 8 mics in such a way that the null point is pointing at the hi-hat, and then it's picking up the cymbals otherwise. That might work. But that's putting a Band-Aid on something that's broken, like a Band-Aid on a fracture where the bone's coming out of the skin. Band-Aid's not going to work. The real answer is, hey, drummer, ease up on your right hand on the hi-hat. Like, chillax a little bit. That's what I would do. And one option is if you're playing it is... So one way to fix that, this is kind of fun, is if you're the drummer, just turn up the overheads in your headphone mix. You'll immediately hear, oh, it hurts. It hurts when I hit the hi-hat too loud. Then you won't hit it because you don't like to hurt. That's one option. Sean6 says, recording classical guitar with a matched pair of AT4041 mics. Do you recommend using one stereo track or two mono tracks in Studio One? I've been seeing differences of opinion and suggestions. That's a good question. I generally use a single stereo track. It's just easier overall. And it depends on how you're setting up the mics, but since I tend to do XY and I tend to try to... Honestly, one big thing you want to make sure you do is balance the left and right as you're recording, whether by moving the guitar or adjusting the preamps or whatever to get it to be nice and balanced. If you do that, then there's really... The only reason I could see needing it on separate channels is I want to EQ one differently or adjust one volume differently. If you balance it well, you won't need to do that. So you'll see if you look at any of my sessions where I record stereo acoustic guitar, it's always on a mono, or it's always on a stereo track, for sure. Same with overheads. I just don't want that one extra track. If I can save myself a little bit of time and space, I'm going to do it. John says, I don't know what that first word is, Hidiho. Hidiho? Hidiho. Do you know Hans Martin Buff? He's a German recording guy. I do not know Hans, but I do like the name Hans. John Rosenau says, punch always comes from the middle. What is your opinion on this subject? Greetings from Germany. Punch always comes from the middle. If you're talking about the mid-range frequencies, I'd say punch is a combo of lows and mids. It's probably really in the low mids, if I had to guess. People give me a hard time on like this Persona Sphere live streams because when I do mix critiques, there's a really good chance I'm going to tell you that something's wrong with the low mids in your mix because the low mids are so important, but if they're too loud, things just sound boomy and muddy, and if they're too quiet, then it kind of takes the punch and the life out of it. So it's a hard thing to get right. But I'd probably say low mids and lows, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of theoretical at some point, isn't it? Let's see. Okay, let's see. Famia Rojas says, to be honest, Joe, anytime someone starts with to be honest, I'm like, brace myself. With your tutorials and videos, you won me over to buy a lot of Personas products. If you use it, it has to be good. Well, thank you. And Personas thanks you as well. I feel like I got a sneaky suspicion I've sold a crap load of Personas gear and software over the years. Greg says, did you do all those background vocals yourself? Any tips on doing that with just one vocalist? I did do them all myself. It's one of those things so let me show you the tracks here. I've got them kind of divided out into sections. Let me expand all these folders so you can see there's a lot of them. So just for that one section, if we zoom out a little bit, you can see it's just, I can't even get them on the screen. It's just a lot. But if you look a little closer, you'll notice it's almost always done in pairs. So these two are one note, these two are one note, these two. So that's 8 tracks, but it's just 4 parts or 4 notes. And then here is, I think that's 6 tracks. Yeah. But each one's doubled. I sing the part, pan it left, sing it again, pan it right. And that's the part. So in some ways, I do the same sort of a thing over and over, but the big catch for me is not to just sing chords, not to just sing stacks of chords only, but to try to find some melodies within that to sing. So for example, I usually go too far and record too many, which I did on this one, and then I have to take some away. So believe it or not, this is the stripped back version a little bit. But on something like this, so here are the main ones on that chorus. These are more just stacked chords. So even though that's basically just chords, there's always the is like a sustain that's moving, and then the so it kind of has a little bit of a melodic feel. Anytime I can make it feel more melodic, I'm gonna try to push into that direction. But then thinking about, okay, if I want more, let's make sure we're not just doing more of the same, like timing and general performance. So I decided to sing something in the gaps. So if we look and you see like here's where I'm singing and then here's where I kind of take a breath, that's where these come in. So it's kind of like a call and response type thing. And so that one's literally more melodic. Da 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 da. And then I went even more and I sang the silly high part too. And I'm not this dumb thing. It's all in my head. So it's, people ask sometimes, and I don't really even know if there's a way for me to like teach it, because it's just kind of something I've just done ad nauseum. Like I did this song and I was producing it and working on it, and I got to a point where I had kind of the bass track, the bass line tracks, the bass and the drum loop and some keyboards and some acoustic guitars. And I was literally saying to myself, don't do it. Don't you do it. And I had to do it. So I recorded a bunch of background vocals and I kind of liked the way it ended up happening. So anyway, Greg, good question. I hope that helps a little bit. I guess the idea is think in terms of melodies and also in terms of harmonies. And think of it as one instrument as well. These are, even though there's a bunch of tracks here, it's kind of 2 to 3 parts total. There's kind of the part A, part B, part C. Even there's a lot wrapped up in it. When I think about it from a like conceptual sound and organizational standpoint, it's really this. These are my background parts. The ahs, the da-das, the in my head, and then there was a couple of harmonies on one section. No, that's the in my heads. So it's 3 parts. 1, 2, 3. That's my background vocal strategy, if that makes sense. Why Fresh says, if you record to a 2-track, what would be an ideal level to set your trim plugin so you have headroom to record, and what level should your vocals be? Good question. So if you're talking about recording to an existing stereo mix, so you got a mix and you're doing vocals over the top of that, it really doesn't matter. It's kind of arbitrary, but I would say start with setting the level for your vocals and set it in such a way that you can sing or rap or whatever you're doing your loudest without it coming anywhere close to clipping. And then turn down the music and turn it up until it feels good in the headphones balanced against that. That's all you got to do. And then afterwards you can try to blend the two together, because chances are the track you're recording along to is already mastered maybe. So you'll need to bring it down and then kind of re-blend it back together to get the volume back up. But yeah, as far as recording, you're talking about the trim plugin. Yeah, then the actual number is just completely depends on the material there. Breton says, do you include 3 minutes of muted animated Joe in the course? Absolutely. Every video has a 3-minute section where I'm muted. It's beautiful and people love it. Oh my goodness. You're killing me, Breton. I can't believe I did that. If you're just joining us, there was a good 3-minute section of the live stream where my audio, I had my mic muted, and I was just talking, and people were chatting me up, telling me I was doing it, but I had scrolled up in the chat, and I was reading a question, so I didn't see all the comments come through. Just embarrassing. So if you missed it, congratulations. Daniel says, hey Joe, do you have a favorite virtual instrument that you use for virtual instruments? Well, I just use the stuff in Studio One. As a Sphere member, I have a bunch of sounds, but it's Impact for drum beats and Sample One, and then I just load a bunch of different sounds into it, depending on what I need. Not a great answer, not a fun answer, but that's what I do. Matthias says, any all-purpose mic you recommend around the $200 to $300? AT4040, Lewitt 440, AKG C214, the Roswell Pro Audio Mini K47. Just get it. You'll thank me. It may be $400, but it's so good. So good. But even this $130 mic in front of me is pretty great. I hate that that's true sometimes because I love expensive microphones. They're fun. But this Personas PX1, all those vocals you just heard, I recorded on this, mainly because it was sitting right here. And so I just recorded with it. Laziness for the win. What compressor is best for pre-recorded setup, Michael? I don't know who Michael is. My name's Joe, but I'll answer the question anyway. What compressor is best for pre-recorded setup? Well, I can't answer the question. Sorry, I don't understand the question. Matthew says, what's your opinion on amp sims versus mic'd guitar amps? You know, a lot of times you can get the tone you're looking for quicker with amp sims. I remember a session I did in Houston. I did a video on YouTube about it. It was kind of a band, like a live tracking session thing. And then we did some overdubs the next day, and the guy had this beautiful Marshall stack that he pulled out, and it sounded cool. And I don't know if it was my ears or just, I don't know, but I tried a couple different mics, a couple different positions, a couple different pre's, and we just couldn't get, like, what sounded in the room was cool, but what got recorded just wasn't working. And we ended up, I think on that one, we pulled out an Avid 11 rack and recorded a Marshall sound because I could get the sound that I wanted quicker from there than I could over there. Does that mean that it was my fault and I should have been able to get it right on the Marshall? Probably. But I've recorded Marshalls and Voxes and Fenders that I don't own because I have amp models that give me those tones. So that's kind of cool too. Like it's kind of like if you had to choose between using one amp for all the guitars on your album or using an amp modeler that gives you a lot of different tones to use, I'm probably going to lean towards the amp modeler because I can switch between different amps to give me different tones instead of forcing one amp to be all those things. That said, I love plugging some pedals in to that Fender Deluxe over there and making music with that too, if that makes sense. Do you like API stuff? I do. I've never owned any. I've only used it just a little bit, but it seems cool. Tom, can you upgrade after signing up? I don't really have a way of doing that, so you'll need to just decide which one you want and go for that. GMD Sounds, do you teach gain structure for live mix on a console? No, but generally speaking, don't clip. Done. Sorry. Do you know what is different? It jumps around and I lose my spot. Do you know, is there a difference to put audio in? I don't know what you're asking, Yiguaba. Sorry, I can't understand you. But I don't know anything about ASIO because I'm a Mac guy and I don't use PC. I'm not against it, I just don't know anything about it. Is pre-fader routing coming before sends? Pre-fader routing coming before sends. Yes. Well, all sends do is take the signal and send it somewhere. So pre-fader has to do with the sends themselves. So yes, it's before the sends, but it's not really. It doesn't really matter because it wouldn't. If you had 3 sends before one send, the other sends don't affect the last send. If that makes sense. That was really confusing the way I just said that. Do you think click settings improve recording quality? As in like the click track? Yeah, I think so. Well, I don't know. I think if you can help the musician groove quicker and really get locked into the song by making some adjustments to how the click track works, then yeah. So that may be maybe an inexperienced. So if I do a session here in Nashville with session players, we literally record to the and we rock out and it's amazing and it's fun because that's what we've all done 1,000 and 10,000 times. But for someone who hasn't ever recorded to a click, they might record better to like a simple drum loop or a 4-on-the-floor kick drum or something that has a little bit of a groove to it. That might help them perform better than a sterile click track. So it really depends on the person. What's your favorite part of the course? What part did you enjoy making the most? Matthew, good question. I enjoyed making the medium production the most. It ended up being this massive session with a bunch of beautiful acoustic guitars, background vocals, a couple of cello tracks, and just tracking cello was really fun. A lot of orchestral stuff done via MIDI that ended up being really beautiful. Just took a lot of turns that I wasn't expecting and became really beautiful. Yeah, for sure. Larry says, in the course, do we learn and record the parts of your song into our DAWs? You can, but no, it's kind of showing my process of me doing it. And if you want to try to emulate that yourself, go for it. I'm not as big on you like copying me as you learning from me and then being yourself. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want you to sound like me. I want you to sound like you. And I want to give you the tools to do that. Marcus Soar says, what time did you set for the background vocal reverbs? They're so lush. This is my favorite. Good question. This is my favorite reverb setting, especially for background vocals, but I will use it whenever I can get away with it. So it's just a plate reverb inside of Studio One with the length set to 6 seconds, and then the pre-delay, I don't know why that's negative, but then the mix is also set all the way to the right. So there's no early reflections. It's just tail, which is kind of how a plate reverb sort of works. And it's this big 6-second decay time, but then I also follow it up with a bunch of reverb, cutting out the lows and the low mids because the reverb can get muddy real quick. But then you end up with this sound here. If I were to stop playing and you counted, you would have to count to 6 before that reverb dies out. It can be absolutely too much, but in certain contexts, especially if you roll off the mids and lows so it doesn't muddy up the mix, you can have it just be this beautiful kind of blanket over the entire mix. That could be an element of glue from the question from earlier. What is gluing a mix together? Sometimes a reverb can be that because it kind of puts everything in a certain space. Daniel says, are you sending all those background vocals to a bus? If so, how do you put them together with regards to compression? Good question. So the way I've got these routed, so these are my different buses for the background vocals here, and then they're all going through this bus. So the individual ones go through these buses, and I've got reverbs on some of those. Then they all go through this bus, which has a kind of a master EQ over everything. So I literally the only thing on these vocals is reverb and one EQ, because that's the way I roll. It's kind of it's the top-down mixing thing. So here's what they sound like if we turn the reverbs off and the EQ. This is the raw tracks. It's going to be fairly muddy because if there's so many vocals. So here's the EQ. That's another case of, so if you take my mixing course, you'll see me do this all the time. The top, which is available in the pro version of the recording course down there. Look at me being a salesman. This is an approach that I kind of stumbled into that I love, where I've got 20 background vocals, and you might think, oh, 20 background vocals, that's 20 EQs and 20 compressors. No, I actually just EQ all the background vocals together because they're one instrument. They're behaving as a keyboard part, and this is the EQ that I needed to make it sound how I wanted it to sound. And that's it. Other than setting levels and figuring out what the reverb situation is, that's it. No compression. Sometimes I'll compress them if they need it, but I didn't need it in this song. So your question of like, how did you deal with compression on this? You're presuming that I'm going to compress it. And I think that's something that you could work on, not assuming that we're going to have to slap a bunch of plugins on a bunch of things. Because sometimes they don't need it. That's one of the, if I could teach you anything, it would be you don't have to put everything on all the time. Sometimes you don't have to put anything on, and that's okay. Daniel, thank you for the question, though. I don't mean to be critical, but just critical in a helpful way. I've been watching too much Gordon Ramsay videos lately, so you're a donkey. I'm kidding. Mark Klassen says, I just joined. I'm sitting at my desk. in my studio. I love it. Thank you for joining. We do have a few new members. Let's see. Adam joined. And Piano Dan, whoever you are. Some of these don't come through with names, which is weird. Elliot joined. Thanks, Elliot. And whoever is Placework also joined. Got the advanced bundle, the pro bundle, basic bundle, basic bundle. Very cool. Thank you all so much. You're going to love it. It's going to be so fun. I'm so excited. Every time we get a new batch of folks in here, people just get really excited and really jazzed to make music, and that makes me so happy. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, I lost it again. Okay. Fingers says, if I remember, there's a small muted section in the recording course. There probably is. I think there was one section that I messed up. So there we go. Gary says, how do you discipline yourself to keep an album to only the best songs, even though you think all 20-plus songs are brilliant? That is a great question. So, story to go along with that. If y'all followed me for a long time, you know back in 2020, 2013, I did this thing where I gave myself a challenge to write 50 songs in 12 weeks, and I did it. And then at the end of that, I was like, well, shoot, I've got 2 albums worth of songs, easy. So I picked like the 25 songs that were my favorite, and I sent them to my wife and my bass player, who's also my wife's brother-in-law, and was like, here's the songs I want. Let me know if there are any you don't like. And between the 2 of them, they cut it down to about 13 songs. So as it turns out, I only had 1 album's worth. They weren't all amazing. So that outside feedback, as painful as it can be helpful. But that's what's cool about writing more songs than you need. Then you can cut the ones that aren't great. If you wanted to do a 5-song EP and you only wrote 5 songs and 3 of them are just okay, guess what? You're going to end up recording some okay songs, which that's never very fun. All right, let me check on the stream settings here. It occasionally shows me that all the viewers dropped out and then came back. So I don't know what that is. It dropped down to 40 and then jumped back up to 100. Technology. Let's see. Noah says, I've been following you since I was living in Cuba and now I live in the U.S. You're awesome. You're getting closer. Just come to Nashville next. David Johnson says, I use metal finger picks when I play acoustic guitar. What's the best way to minimize the clicking of the picks when recording? Good question. So as you know, I'm assuming it's steel string guitar too. You're going to have a lot of metal clicking, picking sound, right? So in some ways, there's not much you can do. But you can also try to position the microphone in such a way that it's more pointing at the neck of the guitar. Like if this is the guitar, this is a smaller body guitar, but you'll get the idea. If you're picking here with your fingers, like there, then maybe you point the microphone somewhere around the 12th to 14th fret. So it's looking here, and it's kind of ignoring your fingers a little bit. And just try to play with that a little bit, maybe even go, the guitar's going to fall over, maybe even go a little bit extreme with it and kind of see what happens. You can also go with a darker sounding microphone, even like a dynamic perhaps. It's not going to pick up those high frequencies as well. That might be the answer. And the answer might be to go to plastic finger picks specifically when you record, if it helps the sound. Because I would guess the reason for playing metal ones is they project really well. So if you're playing, I'm assuming you're playing maybe some bluegrass, and so the acoustic guitar needs to be loud enough to, when you're all get around one microphone, right, for a bluegrass show or whatever. But those are the thoughts I have initially. How much do you use channel strip effects while recording? Not tons. A lot of what I record is just this mic to preamp, record it, go. But if I'm doing vocals or bass or drums, those are the times I'll try to use a couple of my channel strips and just shape the tone a little bit. Nothing crazy, because I've jacked things up with channel strips before. But also, if you took them away, I'd be okay too. Like I could figure it out without any outboard processing. We'd still be okay. We'd still make it. Rudy says, "Hey Joe, big fan. How big a fan are you? How do you release music and get feedback from it to get better? I struggle to even upload something, but if I wanted to, I wouldn't even know where to start." Rudy, that's a great question, and I appreciate your honesty. So your best bet is to get feedback from friends. But the problem is your friends probably aren't into music like you are, so they may not be able to give you like actual constructive feedback other than, that sounds great. Or they don't give you any feedback because maybe it doesn't sound good and they don't know how to tell you because they're your friend. So a couple of options. So this is going to sound like a sales pitch, but I would encourage you to find some sort of online recording community. I happen to have one. It's called my VIP membership. There's a bunch of VIP members here on the live stream. If you go to homestudiocorner.com/VIP, you can check it out. You can try it for free for a month. It's just $10 a month. But we do these regular challenges where like right now we're doing a mixing challenge, but we just finished up earlier in the year. We did a songwriting challenge and a recording challenge. And we've done all kinds of fun challenges just meant to make you work in your studio and present something, to upload it and put it out there for someone else to listen to. But it's a small enough community where you're not putting it out to the world, and it just happens to be a really kind community. So you'll get feedback from me occasionally, and members are critiquing each other's material. It's a great safe place to kind of take that first step of uploading something just to Dropbox and throwing a link in the forum and getting some feedback. Now, it doesn't have to be my VIP membership, but go find a place online where you can share that stuff. Maybe it's a Facebook group. Maybe you have a group of musicians and y'all all are working on stuff and you want to start sharing some of that. That might be a great place to go. But yeah, I started VIP as just a place to do some kind of regular training, ongoing stuff that didn't make sense to put into an entire course. And it's evolved over the years into this beautiful community that I'm really thankful for, because I don't feel like I had anything to do with it becoming what it is, as far as like such a sweet, kind, encouraging community. But that's there. The other option is if you take my recording or my mixing course, there's an option there to get a critique from me, where I sit down and basically do what I'm doing right now. I sit in front of the microphone and I listen to your mix and I pause it along the way, giving you all kinds of specific feedback to your song. So that's something as well. So if you want, you can reach out to me about that. If you need to hire me for a critique, that's certainly an option. Okay. This is G-Funk Productions. G-Funk. I remember you from back in the Ask Joe days. Am I wrong? No, I think I remember you. Says, when saving in Studio One, do you prefer save as, save to new folder, or save new version? I keep losing tracks. Just save. I save it. The song is called the name of the song, and that's what it is. And then I'll save version just when I need to save like a mix. So mix one, I'll use the save new version as mix one, just so I can get back to that. If something happens and I completely jack things up, I can always get back to mix one if I need to. But no, I don't use the save as very much at all. And save to new folder is really only meant for when you're going to send this to someone else and you want to stick it in another folder, or you're going to back things up. Bedulus, I'm pretty sure I didn't say that right, says, about those background vocals, starting out, my music stopped playing. Let's get some music going. Oh, I can't play someone else's music though. That's a no-no. Let's, how do I should probably figure this out. There we go. I can always play some Joe Gilder music, because I won't sue myself for copyright infringement. Okay. Bedula says, when starting out, talking about the background vocals, did you have tricks to help you come up with the harmonies? I'm not a singer, and my singer struggles with them. It's the hardest part of production for us. I don't. So I grew up singing. Grew up in a singing family, so harmonies and singing in choirs and stuff was just something I did from a very young age. So for me, harmonies are just a very second nature kind of thing. I've worked with singers that can just hear harmonies and go, and then I've worked with amazing singers who just can't hear harmonies. You can literally sing it for them, and they still don't come back and sing it back the same way you sang it to them. So in those situations, it can be painful, and maybe you just kind of don't do it. Like maybe that's an option, or you find a singer who can and have them fill in the gaps. There's something to be said for having the background singer be different than the lead singer, so that the tones are different of those parts. But I just love doing it so much that I sing all the parts myself. But it's certainly something you can learn and can practice. But they're also, it's just a real thing where some people will just say, I just don't know how to do harmonies and I can't hear them. And you can kind of learn it, but it might take more work than people are willing to put in, if that makes sense. Not saying they're lazy, but maybe have more things to work on. Daniel just joined the course. Daniel, thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. And Stanley as well. Stanley the Manly, thanks for joining. Okay, I'm scrolling back up. Every time a new comment comes, it messes up my order. Please keep the comments coming. Yiguaba says, my bad, I was asking what's the best compressor setting to put on a mic in track. There's not really a best compressor setting because there's different situations. So if you go watch some of my videos on compression, you'll kind of see what I'm like. If you just search my channel for compression, you'll see a lot on there about it because sometimes you need heavy compression. Sometimes you need fast attack, like on vocals. I like a faster attack and snare drum. Sometimes you need a slower attack, maybe on bass or kick drum. Sometimes you want lots of compression. Sometimes you want a little compression. Sometimes you want no compression. And as much as I'd love to be able to give you a formula that says here's where you use compression. It's kind of different every time. So the best thing you can do is use compressors a lot and learn how they sound and what they sound good on and what they sound bad on. And over time, you'll start to develop kind of an ear for it. Kind of like that harmony thing, but I think it's easier with compression. Because it's more of a technical thing you can just learn. After doing it, you'll recognize it, and you'll be able to say, I taught my wife, who's not musical at all, she'll hear a vocal on the radio and say, man, that vocal's too compressed. And I'll be like, you've never been more beautiful than you are right now. But so if she can learn it, you can absolutely learn it for sure. Alicia says, what's your favorite part of running Home Studio Corner? That's a great question. I mean, it has its ups and downs, as anything does. It's a good question. I love to create. And so with Home Studio Corner, I get to create music because it encourages me to continue making music, which maybe I wouldn't do if I had a regular job that wasn't around music. I might be too tired to make music. So things like doing VIP challenges all the time, if nothing else, I know I'm making music doing those. But also just I'm inspired to make new music, so I have new things to talk about with you, new things to show you. I want to grow as a musician. And I really feel like I've just invited a bunch of buddies to come along and join me on the journey. That's kind of how it feels. But I also love creating the content. I love doing things like this. Like I like just the different ways, the different forms that creativity takes when you're doing a business. Yeah, I love that a lot. So when I got into recording, I wanted to just be a rock star, and I learned recording just so I could record myself. And then I realized I love this whole recording thing. Like, even if I'm not the artist, I love just the buttons and the techniques and all the things that go into making an album, and that's just kind of never left me. Ron Malinga says, of all the mixes you've listened to over the years, what's the one thing you wish people would do or stop doing that seemed to come up time and time again? Ron, this feels like a staged question. Like I sent this to you before and said, hey, ask me this, because this is a fantastic question. So specifically, I'm going to answer this as if like the mixes that I hear from like people that are trying to learn how to do this. I don't have a lot of critique of professional mixes as much as the common mistakes I hear over and over again. That's such a good idea. I gotta write this down for a video idea. Common mixing mistakes. That seems like such an obvious video to make. But it just hits me as cool right now. So for me, there's a couple. One is people go nuts. Probably the biggest is people use way too much processing. They learn what a compressor does, and then they compress the crap out of everything. And they use EQ all over the place, but they don't first stop and say, are the levels even right? So like you'll get a mix and it'll be like the bass guitar is way up here and everything else is down here, and they're like, oh, I can't get the compressor right on the bass. And you're like, psh, psh, hey, moron, the bass is way too loud. Turn it down, and you might not even need to compress it at all. I don't call them a moron, but there's that element of you've jumped ahead to playing with the toys without setting things up properly to begin with. So that's probably the biggest one. Just over processing, doing too much to the tracks. And it became most apparent when I was doing when we did dueling mixes, and anytime I would post we would use one of my songs for it, or if I've done a course where I've shared, like in VIP, occasionally I share, like this month, I shared my tracks to this song we have in front of us for people to be able to mix if they don't have something to mix. And I've noticed, I haven't listened to these yet, but in the past, I would notice songs that I recorded and mixed that I think sound lovely, and I would think, man, the tracks are so good. As long as they don't mess, like if they just leave it alone, their mix is going to be pretty good. But you'll have people who just mess up everything. Like they make the vocals super harsh and shrill. They remove all the warmth out of the guitars, or they make everything really muddy, and you realize, okay, you can ruin anything if you put your heart into it. So some of that, like seeing people just adjusting things without reason, randomly twisting knobs rather than knowing why they're doing what they're doing, and starting with the basics, which is why I developed the 5-step mixing thing. As cheesy as it sounds, I'm gonna mix in 5 steps. It really is. There's kind of I go through stage 1 before I get to stage 2 every time I mix a song, and so kind of that's what brought that on, is like, hey, get the levels right. No, really. Don't grab a plugin until you've set all your levels where they need to be. No, I'm serious. Just get the level. Like when people finally get that, and it takes them a long time to finally get it, I get those comments. They're like, you've been telling me this for 3 years, and I finally got it. You've been telling me this for 9 years, and I finally got it. So I'm gonna keep telling you so that you eventually get it. Famia Rojas says, is this course available at a later time? It will be available in November. I'll open the doors again. So twice a year we open up the doors. The Cowboy Electric, spelled with K's, I appreciate that, says, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge. May I ask what type of computer system you use and your opinion on the requirements needed? I use a Mac. So right now this is a fairly new, like a year or two old iMac, 27-inch iMac. It's got, I don't know, here's the stats. It's got a 3.7 gigahertz, 6-core. I got 40 gigs of RAM. That's a lot of RAM. And the Radeon graphics card. Anything that's fairly new would probably be great. Any new Mac runs this stuff great. That's a very big blanket statement, but I don't know. I really don't. I just kind of what's available, and since I use Mac, there's not that many options, so I just pick one and go with it, and then try to run it into the ground. Like literally, my last iMac, the screen fell off, and that's when I knew it was time to get a new one. It fell off because I tried to upgrade the hard drive and the RAM, and you have to take the screen off, and it only attaches with adhesive. That they give you new adhesive to like stick on there, but it didn't work. And I came up to the studio, and this screen was lying on my mixer. There's like a scratch mark on my mixer where the screen hit completely. Anyway, terrible. But I was trying to get my mileage out of that sucker. How do you fit that many vocals? Bouncing tracks? That's from Unmitigated Gall. No, I use, since I use Studio One, it's unlimited track count. So I could have as many tracks as I want. So this song has, if we open up the bottom one, this song has 35 individual tracks in it, which is on the smaller side for me. Luigi is from Puerto Rico. Welcome. Matthew says, it just jumped. Says, hey Joe, are there any advantages to running Mac over PC with Studio One? I hear that it is. I don't have many problems with it on the Mac, but I hear that on the PC it's even better because I think it's originally written for PC, and then they port that code over to make it for Mac. I hear it's stellar on PC. I'm not a PC guy, so I don't know, but I don't think there's really any advantages either way, honestly. Other than you can probably get a computer that's killer for a lot less money on the PC side. That'd be my guess. Greg says VIP is awesome. You're awesome, Greg. Scott says, I doubt I would have ever released anything if I wasn't a VIP member on Home Studio Corner. The forum and the home studio mixing were game changers for me. Look at these 3 in a row. Gary Fox says the critiques are invaluable. Thank y'all for the kind words. The check's in the mail. I feel like I'm doing Ask Joe now. That was the intro music for a long time. Tom says, do you use scenes in Studio One? I don't. I kind of forgot what they are. So no, I don't use them. That's all I can say about that. We've got some cool new things coming up in the future that you might like, Tom. Giwaba says, on a master, I think I went crazy on stereo with hype vocal. I wonder if I should use a pan controller or just re-record. I'm afraid I'll lose the freshness of the original. Yeah, that's a good question. So re-recording is always an option, but maybe it's not necessary. It may just be, it depends on what's wrong with it. If it's like super clipped, because the recording is clipped and you can't really fix it with anything, then yeah, you might want to re-record. But I've had plenty of mixes where I like, especially vocal mixes, where I spend some time on it and then I say no, and I delete all the plugins and start completely from scratch on that vocal. Maybe I do that 2 or 3 times if the vocal's just giving me fits until I find the right combination that works. That's a pretty normal part of the process. So I wouldn't be very discouraged. That happens to me a lot too. Nexus says, what's up, Nexus? You used to come to a lot of the live streams. Welcome. Says, how many mixes did it take for you to get great at mixing? For me, it took about 200 mixes until I was really happy with what I was creating. That's a great question, but I don't know how to answer it. So for me, it wasn't just mixing that made me better at mixing. I got better at all the aspects. So I got better at songwriting, I got better at recording, I got better at producing, I got better at arranging, and then I also got better at mixing and better at mastering. So like all of those components, if I just get better at one, it doesn't help everything else, and I only will see a little bit of improvement. So like if I get better at mixing but I'm still crap at recording, doesn't matter how great I get at mixing. If my recordings are so bad, my mixes will always be hindered by that kind of, it's the least common denominator. So I would say I just, in the attempt to get better, I try to get better at every step of the process. It reminds me of, if I'm going to preach for a second, but in Christianity, there's this idea of the fruit of the Spirit. So love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faith. They're listed out, but the idea is it's fruit singular, not fruits, if you go and read it. So it's not saying like love, joy, peace, patience. I can't really go work on patience alone in a vacuum, because it's not like I'm going to get really good at patience without also getting really good at love and having more joy and being more at peace. So like it is a weird analogy, but like music is kind of like that. I can't really just get good at mixing, or it's not going to work unless I also get good at recording and at mastering and at production and at songwriting and at lyric writing and at melody writing, and all of those things have to kind of all work together. That's kind of a non-answer, but it's kind of the real answer. I keep losing my spot. Thanks, Nexus, for hanging out. Really like your channel, says Dennis K. Do you have any advice on mixing a full folk band? There's almost nothing on this topic on YouTube. I mean, depends on what you mean by folk band, but I do a lot of acoustic guitar and acoustic instrument stuff, so a lot of my stuff should apply to you. Go take my mixing course. There's some stuff in there that would probably loosely qualify as folk for sure. Tommy says, on a real note, I enjoy your videos. I'm a home studio amateur, and I learn something every time I record. I love that. I love that. JSHO is the first time joining the stream. Love it. Let's see. What's the most underrated feature of Studio One? By the way, your crossfade video short was something new to me. Nice tip. Oh, good. That's the thing about Studio One, is there's so, like, I learn new features all the time. Especially because I'm kind of in my own world of I focus on these specific things, like recording audio, mixing, editing. So I don't do a ton with MIDI. So, but there's so many things like Gregor teaches me about Studio One. What's the most underrated feature? Honestly, the whole integration between the song and the project page. That's a really cool thing. When people finally get what that is and what it does, it's a really cool workflow. So that I can have my songs and they can all be tied to a project, and all the mixes get updated at once whenever I make changes to the songs. That's really cool stuff, and it's been there since version like 1 or 2. Like it's an old feature, but it's super cool. How do you find music supervisors who are looking for hip hop music? I have no idea. Dan James Beats. That's just not a world I'm in. Not the hip hop part as much as just the music supervisor part. I don't know anything about music supervisors. Hidalgo Music Record says, I'll be waiting for that mastering course in the summer. Always learning something. Blessings from Uruguay. Well, cool. Looking like it's going to be August. So I'm about halfway through it. Mastering's tricky. It's tricky to teach because it's simple but complicated. So it'll be good. Yeah, I'm excited about that. Gary says, how much time are you spending listening to rough demos to determine how you're going to score or arrange the song? That's a good question. It depends. Sometimes I write the song the day before. I finish writing the song the day before we were recording it, so I just don't have time to dream about it. Other times, sometimes songs are in various forms, right? Like I'll come up with a piano part and a vocal line, and I'll just kind of have that simmering in my head for a few weeks or months or even years before it becomes something. And so maybe it just sits as an idea that I haven't figured out a song for yet. So it really does vary, but I like to give myself some time to just listen to the guitar vocal and kind of dream, honestly, to kind of see like what intuitively feels right for this song. Like as I listen to it, what do I hear in the band, for example? And then try to kind of have a vision. But honestly, I don't have everything figured out I have a general kind of vague, cloudy idea of what I want it to sound like. Then we go in the studio and we see if we can find it. So it's really almost like, it's like digging, like panning for gold. I know I want gold. I'll know it when I hear it. I think I know where it is, but we're gonna have to try some stuff to find out. And that to me is really fun. I got goosebumps just talking about it because it's fun in the sense, it's also risky because like there's no guarantee we're gonna find it. So you just kind of have to just go in and trust that something good's going to come from it. And you have to just kind of go in and be brave in a creative sense. Like, it's not like I'm being brave, like my life's in danger, but be brave in that sense of I'm going to put myself out there with some other musicians and we're going to see if we can find something cool. And you almost always do, but sometimes you don't. Alicia says, I really love your old songwriting videos where you would just write on screen. Yes, so if you haven't seen those, it was a series called Songwriting Corner. And there's a playlist on my channel, and there's about 10 or 15, maybe 20 of those. Like you can see me write my song Fighter, which became pretty popular. I literally had a fight. I think it was after I had a fight with my wife. I came down the studio after lunch and wrote that song live on YouTube, which is crazy. So, but also can be wicked boring because I just sit there like this while I'm trying to figure out a lyric or something. Anyway, Famia Rojas says, Joe, how do you get the vocal sound huge if you only have one recorded vocal track? Talking about mixing an already live recorded song without having the ability to have the singer do dub recording. That's a good question. One trick you can do is if they sing each chorus pretty similarly, you can actually copy and paste the vocals to a new vocal track. So copy chorus 1 and paste it on top of chorus 2 on another track and do the same for the others, and you'll get yourself a doubled vocal. It can work, and when it does, it's kind of cool. Otherwise, one thing I do, it depends on the style of music, is I think slapback delay is super underrated on lead vocals. That kind of, let me show you real quick. It doesn't make as much sense on this song. What if it's all in my head? So that just needs a nice little reverb on it. But if you were to put like a slapback delay, which I set mine up like this, if you want to see the settings, like 120 milliseconds, sounds like this. And I'm not falling over the edge. And that's, so they changed the analog delay plugin, so that's got more width to it. And it's got like an extra, but if I bring the width down to 0, I think it sounds like a regular slapback. Would you catch me if I fall? So switched it to 2-channel mode, and it's probably a little too much, but it has a certain just, you don't get this big reverb tail that maybe you don't want on a given situation, and you get just a little bit of vibe. For a song like this, it doesn't work, but for like a bigger song, it can be really cool. Would you notice if I'm gone? Just a cool kind of little vibe there that almost gives it a doubled sound, which can be helpful. Good question. Marcus says, if you're not experienced in tracking, you'll probably lack the knowledge of the kind of sound to chase at mixing. That's a great point. It kind of goes both ways. Having some experience mixing helps you know what you can and can't fix in the mix, or what you can and can't polish to make sound great in the mix. Yeah, you really do need experience at both. You don't have to, but it helps. Chris Wilson says, thanks always for taking the time to break down the knowledge for us. As a guitar player, I like to use 4 rhythm guitar tracks, 2 of a Gibson and 2 of an Ibanez. What are your thoughts on panning? If you're going to go 4, I'd probably pan 2 left and 2 right. But I wouldn't lock yourself into saying, this is how I do it every time. Every song needs to tell you what it needs, and maybe they do all need 4 rhythm guitar tracks, 2 Gibsons, 2 Ibanez. But I wouldn't like force yourself to stick to a particularly rigid set of here's how I do it, because some songs might need 3 guitars. Maybe it's a Gibson up the middle and then 2 of the Ibanez's panned left and right, and that's the big massive tone that you need. Maybe it's 4, 2 left and 2 right. Maybe it's some other combination. So to me, I like the idea, but to also I would say make your panning decisions during recording. Don't wait till mixing. So go ahead and find out, where does this need to go? Left, middle, right? And then go ahead and put it there, and then make some production decisions based on where you panned it. It'll make mixing so much easier, because I've had these sessions where I didn't do that, and I've got these things panned well, but there's this one extra track and I don't know where to put it. It'd be great if it had a partner track, so I could pan it to the right and had a partner track that I pan to the left that kind of are doing similar things. So I kind of solved that problem by not, I just lost my train of thought. Solved that problem by thinking about panning during the recording phase rather than waiting until mixing. What is your opinion of Beetle-style mixing, such as panning instruments hard left and vocals hard right? I don't like it. Like, even when I go listen to old Beatles stuff where they do that, I'm like, I get they were playing around with new technology. I don't like it. I wouldn't do it. I'm not against it. I don't think you're bad if you do it. I just think it's not what the vast majority of people are doing, especially because most people probably, I would guess, weren't listening on headphones as much as we do now. So it's even more like, if I'm listening to a stereo across the room and drums are left and vocals are right, I can kind of tell, but it's not a big deal. But on headphones, it's literally like my left ear's getting pelted by drums, my right ear's getting screamed at by a vocalist. That feels weirder. So I think you have to take that into account as well. First time viewer, definitely will be tuning in more often. Bless up. Thanks, 407 Rennie. Glad you found me. Did I just show up in your feed? Like, what happened? How did you end up here? That's cool. Matthias says, what do you do for giving movement or emotion to mixes? Automation? Any specific tip or advice you could give us? The first step, and to continue with the get it right, the source mantra, is I would make sure there's movement in the actual recording itself. So make sure the musicians, are playing with emotion and they're playing with dynamic, and there's build and breakdown. Like, don't force it all to be just in the mixing where you create that. Let it be in the recording, and then the mixing kind of takes care of itself a lot of times. By the way, thank you to Dan for joining. I just saw your order come through. Appreciate that. But yes, automation is one way. A lot of it is just making sure that when you go from section to section that you leave room to grow. One of the big mistakes I hear a lot is a song where, like, there's a verse and I know the chorus is coming and I feel this build up and I'm like, oh, here it comes. It's about to be great. And then it's a letdown. The chorus ends up sounding quieter than the verse. And the reason could be a number of reasons, but a lot of times it's because you mixed the verse and got it sounding great, but then you used up all your headroom and you've got nowhere to go in the chorus. That's why a lot of times when I'm mixing, I go to the last chorus and I loop it and I just mix that for a while. And then I go back and check, see how the verses are sounding. And if they're sounding weak, I can bring them up. But generally speaking, if I do that first, make the final chorus sound amazing, everything else kind of falls into place if it's been produced well too. Yeah. I'm going to take a sip of drink. Tommy Judd says, just finished Jeff Tweedy's short book called How to Write One Song. Ever read it? I've heard it's really good, but no, I haven't read it. Has the acquisition by Fender affected your job in any way? Not much at all. It might in the future. Not in bad ways, just as we kind of figure each other out and kind of mush stuff together. But I think Fender's a cool company. They've done a lot of cool stuff. So I'm glad, especially like in the Fender Play stuff, that stuff is blown up. So it makes a lot of sense to me. Have you used Shep's Omni-channel plugin before? No, but I hear it's great. I saw him demo it at NAMM, and it looked really cool. Ron Malinga says, I find I'm usually having to compress and EQ kick drums. Is it pretty much a standard thing you find yourself doing? EQ, yes. Compression, no. I find myself a lot lately, the compression happens on the drum bus. And then I'll go and compress individuals if they need it, like the snare drum. But the kick drum, I usually just EQ and leave alone and let the bus compression do the trick. James says, do you always have to bus drums? You don't have to, but I always do, for the reason I just mentioned. Milo says, is there a way we can move layers of a track at all? No, I talked about right at the beginning of the live stream. It's currently not something you can do. You'll have to duplicate that to a different track and then move it around. And I guess I understand why people want to move things, but just make a new track if you want to move it. Like, duplicate the track. Ron says, what drum part do you find you have to gate the most? I do not gate drums, Ron, so there's your answer. Like, I really don't. I like to have the sounds bleed most of the time. If there's a tom that's ringing out and it's picking up and I'm hearing it in the mix, then I won't use a gate. I'll just go edit out all the places between the tom hits. To me, that's just easier. But yeah, I rarely, almost never use gates. That's just how I roll. Is that a new song for your next EP? If you're talking about the one on the screen, it is a new song. I don't know where it's going to go, but it's kind of fun. Afonso says, do you see any issue with delaying the room mics? I don't know who said it, but the idea is to take around 15 milliseconds for the sound to travel from the drums, bounce on the wall, and hit the drummer's ears. I think it's fun to mess around with room mics because you can't really mess things up. So I've had some people that want to move the room mics up in time to be time aligned with the snare hit, so it tightens up everything. But then, yeah, the opposite of moving it back, you can kind of create the idea that they're farther away. Room mics are fun to mess with. Sometimes I'll throw distortion on there or a bunch of compression, or you can really kind of have a lot of fun with room mics. Okay, this rap is so good. He wrote this in the studio.
Can't take away from all the men and women who gave their lives on the battlefield where the battle's real, but America's a battle still. Built off the back of black brutals, bloodthirsty opportunists, build us to the highest consumer. Monthly trips on slave ships, bodies shackled to the docks. Fast forward to present day, they try to tell me it's done stop. When they throw us in these slums, miseducate all our youngs, and they flood us with these drugs and these guns, then judge what we become. I'm just saying, let's be specific if you want statistics. 1 out of 15 is in prison. Coincidence is nonsense. I see the same pattern. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. I scream for my people until we're treated equal.
Whew, I did that track. That was several years ago. That's my buddy Low Pro Dante. Gosh, he was so good. I met him and he talked a game like he knew what he was doing, and I just had this. I was like, he could be terrible, but I just get this feeling he's going to be good. And he shows up with half-written lyrics, finishes it in the studio, and spits that out in just a few takes. Like, he knew exactly what he wanted. He's like, I'm going to record this. Now I'm going to double this. I'm going to record 4 bars, and then take 4 bars off, and then record 4, and then piece it together after. It was just, I wish I had cameras rolling when we did that, because it was so fun. Anyway. John says, would you recommend a direct box for recording guitar? No. If you're recording acoustic guitar direct, stop it. It sounds terrible. If you're recording electric guitar, maybe a direct box, but most interfaces have like a guitar input, and that's essentially the same thing, so I think you'll be fine. Jonathan Thrift says, if you have recorded bluegrass banjo, do you compress it? And if so, how do you approach the settings? No. Banjo already sounds compressed. Banjo is a very I don't know what the word is. It doesn't have a lot of dynamic to it. All the notes are the same volume, kind of. So you don't really need compression on banjo. You could maybe make an argument for if you use compression with kind of a quicker attack and release, you could pick up, the pick noise would come through a little bit more. So that might be a situation to do it, but I generally, acoustic instruments in general, like not drums, like acoustic guitar, mandolin, banjo, I don't tend to compress those unless they need it. Compression just messes it up a lot of times for me. Ari Hunt Bade, what's up, brother? What is your mix setup for quick mix and release? How to approach one take recording of a singer-songwriter and then releasing it? Well, as far as how to approach that kind of recording, I literally talk about in the course down below. We do a whole thing on just guitar vocals, live and overdubbed. But as far as the setup for quick mix and release, the thing that makes it quick is just I've gotten fast at it over the years. I don't mean that to be snarky, but if you sent me a guitar vocal, I could send it back to you in 10 minutes with a pretty good mix on it. But it's just because I've done it so many times, I know which moves I need to make to fix which problems. I think that's what you're asking. I hope that helps. Have you ever worked with an artist that's just starting to repent, that still use foul language, and what's the best way to let them know the issue? Well, no. But I just wouldn't see it. It's not really my place, I guess. Anyway, when it comes to MIDI, do you find yourself using the humanize function much? I humanize it because I play it myself and I don't fix it. I don't quantize it after, so that's probably I humanize it by being a human. I know what you're saying, but I don't use the humanize function because I don't do tons with MIDI, and when I do, I treat it like audio where I just play it in for the most part. I'll quantize sometimes when it just needs it or it's a very simple part. But yeah. Alicia says, do you use MIDI instruments? Do you use them much? Great question. I just answered. Yeah, I use them, but a lot like just regular recorded instruments. I find a sound that I like, and then I perform it. And then I'll adjust it a little bit if I need to. Same with audio. I might tighten up a performance timing-wise if it needs it. But generally speaking, I don't do a ton of MIDI messing stuff. Ron says, I've heard producers say the speakers they use are more so that everyone can hear a mix or master in the studio, but headphones are what you use more often. What do you find yourself using more? Speakers more. I mean, the big honking speakers you see in big studios, yeah, those are for... those are mainly for just letting everybody hear it in the room. But no, I'd say I do most of my work on studio monitors. Headphones are great, but no, I do my work on speakers 90% of the time, except for when I'm recording, obviously. GB Fusion says, any tips for reducing 3 to 6K harshness from electric guitars while preserving clarity and air? So do this. Get an EQ. Whoops, wrong. So put an EQ on the guitar bus or the guitars that you're trying to do, and then find, if you do an EQ like this, like a very narrow EQ, and boost it in that 3 to 5K range, it's probably going to be closer to 3 than 6. It might be down in 2 to 3. You'll find there's like a certain frequency that whistles and jumps out really loudly. When you find that, pull it down, and you'll find things will smooth up really well. I actually have an example of this. Let me find it. Let's see. I think it was on this song. Shut up, Joe Gilder. While this is coming up, Carlos says, have you ever mixed harmonica? Yeah, harmonica's cool, and especially if it's like more bluesy, you run it through a guitar amp simulator, and it sounds amazing. Slapback delay can sound cool on harmonica, or if it's a softer like a ballad type thing, a nice reverb. Really, you can treat harmonica a lot like a voice. Harmonica, and even like a lot of brass instruments too, like saxophone, I'll treat like a voice because it has a lot of the same characteristics. Harmonica doesn't have the same anyway, but yeah, I treat it like a voice a lot of times. A little bit of reverb, a little bit of delay, things like that. Okay, so here's a mix. I think I did that EQ I was talking about on the guitar. Shoot. There it is. So right here are some guitars. Let me solo them. and find a spot where they're playing. Okay, right here. Okay, so I hit play. So specifically, listen to this frequency as I turn it up. This is the frequency I found. So this is at 4.7K. I'm going to turn it up. It's going to be annoying. I won't make it very loud. To be fair, most frequencies sound bad when you boost them like that, but that was the one that seemed to be ringing out the most. And so when I pull that down, it just smoothed out the guitars, but it still leaves most of the frequencies in. Listen to, when I turn it on and off, this kind of like a high whistle just disappears when this EQ kicks in. The graphical thing's messed up, but there you go. That is Zach Ashdown. He's a Persona Sphere member. He let me mix those tracks inside the Persona Sphere members area. It's super cool. We're not quite done, but it's really fun. So that was an example of that guitar notch thingamajig. Okay. What makes a good guitar metal mix? Man, metal guitar is hard. Obviously, you got to get it right at the source. I don't know. I don't mix a lot of metal, but you got to have... It's got to be big, but the drums and bass have got to be solid, and then the guitars have to kind of sit right on top of it. It's hard. It's hard. And a lot of it is, it depends. If it's well recorded, then the job's a lot easier, but a lot of times when you go for heavier songs, heavier guitar parts, people tend to go they crank the gain too much on like their distortion pedals or their amps, and it just causes a lot of fizz, kind of like the sound we heard there. That wasn't as bad. And you can sometimes EQ and do some magic there to thin it out, but a lot of times it would be like, what I tell people a lot is what you think is a really distorted sound is actually not as distorted as you think. Like you think of AC/DC, you think big, devil horns, rock music, but their guitars are surprisingly clean if you go and listen. Like it's not super fizzy. Now they're more just straight rock than like metal, but so just try to leave some gain in there. Like make it a little cleaner than you think you need and see if you can make it work. A lot of times what I find is like they make it really gainy, but the real reason they're doing it is because the guitar's just too quiet in the mix. So they increase the gain, like the fuzziness of it, to get it to be louder when they could just push the volume up. And a cleaner tone pushed up sounds better than a quieter tone with too much gain. If that makes sense. Claudius says, I'm an inspiration. Boom. Thanks, Claudius. Also a great name. Vaughn just joined VIP. Vaughn, if you're here, thank you. I saw you come. We were emailing earlier, and Bobby just joined the course. Thanks, Bobby. What a great name, Bobby. Ron says, Marcus says, do you like AI mixing tools like Soothe or Isotope Neutron? Generally speaking, no. But I also haven't used them. Maybe they're amazing. It's kind of like the Gibson made a guitar that had tuners that tuned itself. Cool concept, don't want it. That makes sense. I like doing the stuff. But some people don't. I produced an EP for a friend of mine a few years ago, and he said, I just don't want to learn any of the recording stuff. I just want to write songs and then record them. Jay Batista. Joe, I got to be honest with you. You're handsome as hell. What's your secret? I'm getting Oh, you're a 15-year-old producer. Oh, you're a charmer, Jay Batista. Keep your charm. So Jay in another post says, quick question, any advice for a 15-year-old producer who needs improvement on mixing? First, don't lose your charm. You buttered up this middle-aged dude really well. So I would say, Jay, getting better at recording also gets you better at mixing, and do a lot of mixing. Get your hands on tracks and just mix a lot. And don't spend gobs of time on one mix. Like, spend enough time, but then move on to the next one. You're not going to, if you were to spend, let's say you give yourself 12 weeks to make some improvement. You could mix the same song for 12 weeks, or you could mix like a song a week for 12 weeks. Which one do you think you'd be better? Which one do you think would make you better? It'd be the second one. So do that. Also, my secret for my handsomeness is clean living. I'm just kidding. It's probably drinking lots of bubbly water. Handsome. That's ridiculous. I think I've made it to the bottom of the list of questions. And also, how have we been going for 2 hours and 2 hours and 15 minutes or so? That's crazy. Ron says you recommended a mic. It's the Roswell. Is it? I don't have it right here. I was going to show it to you. It's the Roswell Mini K47. So it kind of emulates an old like U47 mic, I think. It's just a cool mic. As last I checked, it was $399. If it's gone up a little bit, it's still worth it. It's one of those like, oh, I would put this up against like expensive mics. It's just really good. And the owner, the guy who developed it, is a longtime friend as well. He's just a cool guy. I was just talking to him the other day on the emails. Why is there air? I don't understand the question. All right, cool. Well, I think my voice is shot. I don't think I can go any longer. And all my Aldi brand bubbly drinks are empty, so that's my cue. But thank you for being here. Those of you that stuck around the entire time, that is a lot of Joe Gilder, and I applaud your stick-to-itiveness. Thanks for being here. I hope this was helpful for you. If you have further questions, leave comments here. Shoot me an email. I try to be good about getting back to folks on email and whatnot. Final roll call. As you can see on the timer, we're less than 2 hours away from the doors closing to home studio recording. That is my flagship recording course. It's so good. And by the way, I offer a 365-day guarantee. Like, if you want to email me, if you buy it tonight and want to email me on May 22nd, 2023 and say, it wasn't good, I didn't like it, I didn't get better, then I'll say, okay, here's your money back. Like, I just want you to get better, more than I want to keep your money. So if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, but it's gonna work because it's really, really good. It's 84 videos, might be more now. It's 30 plus hours. It's in depth, but man, it's a lot of fun. So I hope you'll check it out. Go to the link below. It's in the description of this video, but it's also below at homestudiocorner.com/record. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. And here's to making some more and better music. Gilder out. See ya.
To your fire.